Hermit Island is located 2 miles northwest of the Islands. Its, its size is small, but it has a great importance to the island group. Hermit Island, or at the time Wilson lived there, it was referred to as Wilson Island. This forested land was visited by Native Americans from LaPointe and the mainland. William Wilson was the first white man to settle this land. Welcome to the Vale. Welcome to the Vale, where the paranormal is our playground. We are the Phantom Pals, Nick and Leah, and this week we are going to talk about Hermit Island. I have done Hermit Island with my sister, but we are now the Vale, so I thought we should revisit this.
Okay.
So, are you curious where Hermit Island is?
I'm kind of like a hermit somewhere,
And
hiding.
and what is Hermit Island?
I have no idea.
Okay,
I
well,
think you should educate me.
there is a group of islands up north in Wisconsin called the Apostle Islands. It is part of LaPointe, Wisconsin. This would be where the French fur traders would have been. Back
You?
in that, no, not
No,
me.
no,
No,
not you.
not me. But the French would have settled it first,
Okay.
and for white men at least. So it's called Hermit Island because of this person named William Wilson. Try to say that name many times.
William Wilson.
Yeah.
See, I got it.
This has not. It has not been verified that he does wander about Hermit Island, but it is said that there is bizarre history to make it a strong possibility that he does haunt this island. So, I don't know. Sounds like a fun place to go and investigate. They do have campgrounds. I don't know if they have cabins, so we would have to go on their website and see if they do have cabins, which would be interesting. So, how?
If they didn't, would you?
Well, it'd be tough to get a car there, or
I'm sure you would have to ferry.
Yeah. So now, yeah, I probably would though for one night maybe. I wouldn't, be there too long.
We're not much of campers.
No. So how did William Wilson end up on Hermit Island, or this island?
Do tell.
I mean, it was known as Wilson Island at one point. Well, okay. That is a very interesting question. So now, between the research that I've done, there were two conflicting reasons to why Wilson may have settled the island. Now, as we move forward, we will confront this, but first, let's do a little background on Wilson. Well, if I said somebody was a hermit, what would you think they were like?
Kept to themselves, kind of like reclusive.
Okay, well, he was a loner, so yes. Okay, so he probably had a good reason, right? Wouldn't you think?
Some people are just like that.
Some people are like that? Okay, well, he did have a good reason. But first, I would like to tell you about Wilson. He was born in 1791 in Canada. He has been said to have arrived in the village of LaPointe in 1837. He would have been about 46 at the time. During this time, he was employed by the American Fur Company, and the French did trade in a lot of fur, so that makes sense. He was responsible for creating wooden containers that the company that transported their goods in. One account says Wilson was expelled from LaPointe in 1850s. Now, why would he be kicked off this island? What could someone do that they would be kicked off the island.
Theft, maybe? Maybe
Well,
arguments?
well,
Village nuisance?
okay. Well, this goes into another person as well. It's quite an interesting story. First, Wilson would have been 5 to 10 years living on the point. The account goes that after years of uneventful life on the point, Wilson entered into a personal feud with a John Bell.
I feel like that name has said so much.
Mhm.
John Bell. It's
So,
like must have been a common name.
yes, John is a very common name.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm. Now, this feud, it, Bell, he was a man of influence on the point, Wisconsin. So, he was known as King John Bell. At one point, he was the self appointed sheriff and also the magistrate. Um, so, Bell was also the person of influence with the Federal Bureau of Indian Affairs, because at this time, there's Indian life too there. Now, according to the legend, Wilson and Bell did not like each other, hence feud. Feud, yeah,
Right.
feud. So, I mean, I think you kind of figured that out. Well, the this was a slow boiling feud that finally reached its peak when Wilson attempted to kick Bell's dog.
You don't kick a dog, dude.
Yeah, exactly. Now, this led to Bell challenging Wilson to a fight in the street. Now, this may sound harmless, just two men with too much testosterone, right? Yeah,
He was trying
no,
to kick his dog. Like,
exactly. Now, but the stakes ended up not being so harmless. They were quite extreme, actually. Both parties agreed whoever lost would leave the village forever, never come back.
dude, over a fight?
Yeah. Now, this brawl was to happen in the streets of Bayfield, which is another area in the Apostle Islands. Um, this brawl was not a short brawl. They were both pretty big guys. So, as you have probably guessed, Wilson lost, considering it's Wilson's Island, Hermit Island, and Wilson ended up living there.
Sure.
So, being a man of his word, he held to his end of the the bet or the agreement, and he left and went to an island, and he went to Hermit Island. Now, this isn't the only reason he may have left.
Yep.
So this could just be lore.
Okay.
Okay, there's two different ways. Now, another theory on why he left was due to the death of an unknown wife. Unknown because, record keeping back then.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, it is not verified that Wilson ever married during his time on La Pointe, Wisconsin. There is a persistent theory that claims that a sudden illness took Wilson's wife suddenly before he could get help. If this is true, you can imagine that Wilson was very distraught and a shell of the man he was. I mean, if you lose a spouse,
It's a big deal.
it's a big deal. And he wasn't very old, but at that time, I guess maybe. Now, with both legends, the true version is lost in history. There's no record of either. These are just the theories. But in the
One is
late,
kind of sadder than the other.
yes, one's just kind of like, here, hold my beer, and
Well.
you know how But now in the late 1850s, Wilson took his stuff and moved to a small round island. He did not have any visitors to this island unless it was by invitation. So if he didn't invite you, don't fucking show up. I don't want to see you.
Okay.
Yeah, and I would love that. Just so you know, be great. Now, he made quick work building a modest cabin and working the island, growing a garden and hay. He had a decent amount of chickens.
Chickens.
Chickens, yes, chickens. Wilson
I
lived
want a
as
chicken.
okay. Well, talk to Wilson.
All right.
Wilson lived a solitary life and seemed to find a peaceful life and intended to keep his peaceful island. Wilson did not work, or no, he still did work in the for the coop for the area, still making an income. If you were not doing business with Wilson for his woodwork, you would keep off of Hermit Island. So he did still originally continue building those containers to haul furs.
Okay.
And they actually were barrels. So he would control the flow of his visitors. Okay. Now, at some point, um, I got this out of a book from Benjamin G. Armstrong, Early Life Among the Indians in 1892. The book can be found actually on www.wisconsinhistory.org. So if you wanted to go into it, you could
Okay.
and look it up. Now, Wilson had no problem settling for the role of a mysterious hermit. Now, Wilson did not serve all contacts. This kept his ability to be able to get things he needed. So, one of these links was Armstrong, who in 1855 moved his family to Oak Island. So, this is a bunch of islands. And as you can imagine, in the winter, it freezes over and you can probably just go island to island.
Sure.
Um, which happened to be it was about 2 miles from Wilson Island
Mm-hmm.
or Hermit Island. Now, Armstrong built a small trading post to offer services to the area around him. Armstrong was known as the person to go to get what you needed. Now, this is where Wilson asked and or requested a barrel of Wisconsin whiskey.
Hey, man, he had to
Yeah,
keep his winter up.
yeah. So, interestingly, Wisconsin was known for drinking way back then too. So,
Facts.
yeah, so we're well known for this. Now, when Wilson came to get the barrel of whiskey, he asked Armstrong to help bring it home to his island. When the pair made it to Wilson's home, he paid him.
Okay.
Makes sense. Deliver it.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe paid him a little extra. I don't know. According to legend, it was about 3 to 4 buckskin pouches of whatever the currency was.
Mm-hmm.
Wilson was not an educated man, and he seemed to trust Armstrong since he would ask him to count his money.
Okay.
Now, that's pretty trusting to me. But I guess you're on an island by yourself and you control the flow. So you know who you can trust, I guess.
I guess so.
Yeah. Um, so how much did Wilson have? Well, Wilson, he had a king's ransom. Now, keep
What
in
does that
mind,
mean?
he had a lot of money for that time.
Okay.
Keep in mind, this is the 1850s.
Okay.
So Armstrong counted about $1,300. Now that is equivalent to about 40,000 now. And he's just on this island, probably has no rent, none of this other stuff. Farms. I mean, he has chickens. That's gotta be worth some money.
I don't know if chickens were even worth anything.
Okay. So it's not bad for doing business on a secluded island.
No.
It's actually pretty good. So I would think he could have been a person of influence if he was actually around the people.
Didn't seem to be his personality so
No.
far.
So, okay. So now, as weeks became months to years, Armstrong and Wilson became, I guess, loosely defined as friends.
Okay.
Wilson trusted him. He didn't have any problem with him. He allowed him to his house. So I guess that's about as close as Wilson's going to get to somebody defined as a friend.
Okay.
Now, in the winter of 1861, Armstrong would be concerned when he became aware of the fact that no smoke had come out of Wilson's chimney for days. This is winter, and we know Wisconsin winters. We just had a deep freeze, so
I suppose. All right. So the islands must have been close enough that he
yeah,
was able to see Wilson's home
right,
and notice.
right.
Okay.
And no smoke would mean no fire.
Right.
No fire would mean no stay warm.
Right. No, stay warm. Okay.
No stay warm. Yeah. Now, I don't know how else you would have stayed warm. Maybe it was that Wisconsin whiskey he had. I don't know. So, this didn't sit well with Armstrong and kind of gave him a cause for worry. It
Right.
was kind of like, all right, I don't know, my buddy's doing all right.
Right.
I mean, I see him as a buddy. He's probably like, I can tolerate me.
Right.
But so he went to get on a rowboat and headed to inform Bell, the guy he had the fight with.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Why would you go tell the guy that he had a fight with?
so surprisingly, Bell helped to get a posse together. So a group of people, for people who don't know what that is, to investigate and check on Wilson.
Okay.
And when they got there, they found an unlocked door. The fire had not been lit in days, and there was a stench of death. Wilson was found lying face down, and signs that it was not a natural death. So now this is kind of the drawback to an island where there's no witnesses. Right?
Depends on which side you're on.
So for Wilson, it was not a good
Not
thing.
a good thing.
Because you can't. When would this have happened? So the murderer had searched for something in the house. Now, there is no record if he or they found what they were looking for. Armstrong remembered counting the buckskin bags and told Bell they looked for the bags, but all they found was $60 behind the clock. But when he counted it, there was 1,300, equivalent to 40,000 now.
Okay.
So, did someone kill him for the money? Now, is this a good enough reason to you that someone might haunt the place?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
It's very possible that somebody wanted the money, but the question is, who knew he had that much? And then the next question is that a good reason to haunt?
Okay.
I think it's a really good reason because I do believe that when lives are cut short like that, like he's not expecting to be murdered, your life is cut short. Maybe there's some energy left over.
Yeah. Okay. I agree. Now, interestingly, this is not the only reason it might be haunted by Wilson.
Okay.
What was the other thing Wilson cherished about that island?
Besides being completely alone?
Exactly.
Okay.
The peaceful, nobody there, quiet, simple life, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, something came along after his death to disturb this peaceful island. A wealthy investor named Friedrich Prince, aka the famous Quarryman or the Brownstone King, because Hermit Island or Wilson Island was known for brownstone, and it was mined for brownstone.
Okay.
He purchased the island from Elias Drake from Minnesota with stock in the sandstone quarry located in Bayfield. In 1891, Friedrich established Excelsior Quarry and began to sell brown sandstone. The quarry employed over 100 men. Now you could imagine this would kind of upset a peaceful environment on a deserted island,
Well, yeah.
or very well not used island. Um, from having the island to himself to being taken over by a quarry, God, that's a huge change,
Okay.
right? Well, in 1895, Friedrich built a house, and this is not a modest home. This was an elaborate home on the East Shore. This was built in expectation to his marriage to a much younger woman. But upon arriving to the island that same day, she was not impressed with the island. To me, this almost sounds like he purchased a wife. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Or used his influence to get paired with her.
Okay.
That's just that's just me.
Much younger, but she was not impressed with an island.
No.
Got it.
Now, it has been said that the spirit of Wilson was has actually soured the young lady. So she must have seen his spirit. It was probably more like she was just a spoiled rich girl, is my thinking. But who am I to say? Whatever the reason, the house was never used by the time it was built. It was just never used. The house became a resort in the early 1900s. By the 1930s, Wilson, it said, had his way with the noisy visitors on the island. So there were reports of something happening. Now, in the end, Wilson has had the last laugh, as the island is now part of the Apostle Islands with federal legislation by former Wisconsin Governor and U.S. Senator Gaylord Nelson, and this was signed by President Nixon. This makes Hermit Island land protected from development.
Okay.
With an unnatural death and the loss of an acquired hoard, that is a good reason for Wilson to still be on the island. The murder has not been solved to this day. Now, add to the fact that this was once a peaceful island and is now disturbed by dozens looking for his loot. So people still go there looking for it. Now, I would at least want a treasure map before, because then I would get my eye patch, my pirate hat, and carry my bottle of rum.
Okay.
Maybe a fake bird on my shoulder. I don't know. And you would say you don't know me.
Right? I don't know who this dude is. He's looking for something crazy.
There are claims that under a faint glow of the moonlight, the unknown figure can be seen walking along the edge of the island. Those that have seen it swear it resembles the long dead William Wilson. The question is, has the spirit of Wilson returned to keep watch over the island, or is this just another urban legend?
I would venture to say that there's likely truth to the story.
Okay.
Um, there's a book, was it like Wisconsin history or
Mm-hmm.
something? So there's definitely some truth in documentation to prove that he moved there.
And
Or
he
he was
was
living there.
and he was a person.
Yep, and
Yep.
like working there. If he was indeed murdered and the buckskin pouches weren't caught or found, I should say, and this
Mm-hmm.
money never found, then he was killed for his money.
Okay.
Here's the thing. I would want to know who all knew that he had money. He was getting paid.
Well,
So I know that, was it John?
John Bell was the one who he had the fight with that he lost. Then there was Armstrong, the one who counted the money.
Part of me wants to say that John Bell had something more to do with this.
Or could it be the employer that he was still making the stuff and knew he was getting money?
Why would the employer kill the employee and put him kind of out of business because that's the guy he needed to make
True.
the barrels?
Okay. Or could have it been somebody else wanted that job and got rid of him?
I mean, why?
I don't know.
Right.
So, just some fun folklore.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think it's kind of both, because there's two stories to how he may have ended up moving to Hermit Island, and so at one point it was known as Wilson Island. So he did live there, and he did work for this company, this fur trade company, and built their barrels um, to ship furs. So he was a real person. Now, the feud and how far it got with Bell, there's no history on that. Um, kind of curious. Might have to do a little more research to see maybe if I can find a little more and we can update it. Um, but other than that, if his ghost is there, until I've been there, I can't really say.
Right.
Um, but if you know of the story, you're out on Lake Michigan or whatever lake it is
Lake
up
Superior.
there, Lake Superior, and you might think you saw something. And
That would be cool.
yeah, so um, we're gonna definitely have to look into this campground and see what we can do.
Listen, if there ain't any cabins, it might be a day trip.
It might be a day trip, but we could.
All right, everybody, we got Nick on the podcast trying to ask me to go camping.
I mean, I could just tell you you're going to.
It's infuriating being his partner sometimes. I'm just saying.
You get by.
Uh-huh.
Well, thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed our podcast. That is Hermit Island, and ever want any more history, there's a bunch of stuff that has actually happened up there on all the other islands. So, sounds like a great place to visit.
We definitely want to stay on Madeline Island.
So, yes.
And it has a hotel, so
Yes.
then I can shower. So we're good. We're good.
Okay. Okay. So, be sure to like and subscribe for future episodes, and thank you for joining us.